In these hills, every holler's got a story. Some tell of lights that dance in the dark or footsteps that follow when no man's there. Most are just whispers handed down by firelight, fading like smoke into the night. But once, only once, did the whispers rise into the daylight, bold enough to be written into law. A death recorded in the books not as sickness, nor accident, nor crime of man, but as the work of a spirit. A murder laid at the feet of a witch. This is the tale of John Bell, of his family, and of the haint called Kate that promised his death. This is Appalachia's only supernatural murder. Welcome to Legends from the Holler, where the ridges keep their shadows and the hollers whisper forgotten tales. Light the lantern and step into the dark with me. The year was 1817. The place was the Red River Settlement in Robertson County, Tennessee, what folks now call Adams. It was frontier country, a raw cut of the earth where families carved farms from cane thickets and heartwoods. Life was hard. Faith ran deep in old folk ways. Charms, signs, and stories rode right alongside the Bible. John Bell Sr. was the kind of man others respected. A prosperous farmer, husband to Lucy, and father of 9 children, he worked nearly 1,000 acres of good bottom land. His cabin stood solid against the seasons, and his pew in church was always filled. But prosperity can draw more than admiration. Sometimes it draws envy, and sometimes it draws something that wears no human face at all. It began in the summer of 1817. Out in his cornfield one evening, John raised his eyes and froze. There between the rows was a beast like none he'd ever seen. Its body was shaped like a dog, but its head was that of a rabbit. Startled, he fired his rifle. The creature vanished. Not long after, the Bell family began to hear strange noises at night. Knocking on the walls, scratching at the log timbers, gnawing sounds that echoed in the rafters. At first they thought it was animals, but the noises grew louder, bolder, like something wanted them to know it was there. Bed sheets were yanked from sleeping children. The sound of heavy footsteps prowled through the cabin, though no one was there. And before long, the unseen force turned violent. Betsy Bell, John's youngest daughter, just 14 years old, became its favorite target. She was pinched, slapped, and even stuck with pins. Angry red welts marked her skin, and sometimes the shape of a handprint remained where no hand had been. Neighbors were called, and they too saw and heard the disturbances. James Johnston, a close friend, spent the night in the Bell home and fled at dawn, declaring, "It is a spirit," just like what we read of in the Bible. Then the whispering began. At first it was faint, murmurs like wind through leaves, but night after night it grew stronger, clearer, until one evening the family heard a full voice rise out of the shadows. The entity called itself Kate. Some claimed it was the spirit of Kate Batts, a neighbor who believed John Bell had cheated her in a land deal. She was known as an eccentric, a woman sharp of tongue, and though living, folks whispered her soul had turned bitter enough to curse. The voice mocked hymns, recited scripture, and engaged in full conversation with anyone brave enough to answer. Soon, the Bell Witch, as folks came to call it, was the most infamous haunt in all of Tennessee. Word spread fast. Travelers came from miles around, hoping to challenge or witness the witch. Kate never disappointed. She revealed secrets no one could have known, mimicked the voices of the dead, and once recited, word for word, 2 different sermons given at the same time 13 miles apart. The Bell Farm became a gathering place for curiosity seekers. Some came in fear, others in fascination, all left shaken. Even General Andrew Jackson, hero of New Orleans and future president, came to Adams to see the witch for himself. His wagon, it said, became stuck fast on the road near the farm. The horses strained, but the wheels wouldn't turn. Jackson swore aloud, "By the eternal boys is the witch!" That night, his men were assaulted by unseen hands. Some were pinched, others scratched, and one was hurled across the room. The next morning, the general fled, declaring he'd rather fight the whole British army again than face the Bell Witch. When General Andrew Jackson fled the Bell Farm, it was clear the witch was no ordinary tale. But her malice was not scattered. It was focused. Two people bore the brunt of her wrath: Betsy Bell, the youngest daughter, and John Bell himself. Betsy's engagement to Joshua Gardner was broken under the spirit's relentless torment, but for John, the torment turned deadly. He was struck with strange seizures, his muscles weak, his breath foul with the scent of garlic and metal. The witch's voice taunted, "Old Jack Bell is mine. He will not last long." On December 19th, 1820, John slipped into a coma. His son John Jr. went to fetch his medicine but found a strange black vial among the bottles. Inside was a dark, oily liquid he had never seen before. Testing it, he placed 2 drops on the tongue of a stray cat. The animal convulsed and died instantly. From the shadows came Kate's triumphant cry, "It's useless to try and help old Jack. I gave him a big dose last night and he will never get up again." The vial was cast into the fire. Witnesses swore a blue flame shot up the chimney before the glass shattered. By morning, John Bell was dead. At his funeral, mourners gathered to pay respects, but as prayers rose, so did the voice of Kate, cackling, mocking, and singing bawdy songs until the last of the grieving fled the cemetery. And so it was recorded. John Bell, patriarch of the Bell family, had died at the hands of the Bell Witch, the only death in American legal history formally attributed to a supernatural entity. What was in that cursed bottle? Modern scholars and physicians have studied the accounts, especially those preserved in Richard Bell's diary and Martin Ingram's later history. Their conclusion points not to the supernatural, but to a very human poison: arsenic. Arsenic poisoning causes the very symptoms John Bell suffered: neurological decline, difficulty swallowing, seizures, and the garlic-like odor on the breath. It was commonly sold as rat poison in the 1800s, often in dark, oily mixtures. And when burned, it produces a distinctive blue flame, just as the family described. If arsenic was the cause, then who slipped it into Bell's medicine? Was it truly the work of a vengeful neighbor like Kate Batts, a disgruntled relative, or someone else entirely, hidden behind the perfect scapegoat of the witch? After John's death, the witch's presence slowly faded. She returned briefly, as promised, 7 years later to speak with John Bell Jr., and again in whispers more than a century afterward. Today, the story endures. Visitors still travel to Adams, Tennessee to explore the Bell Witch Cave, a yawning hollow said to echo with her voice. Many claim to feel cold hands brush their arms or hear unseen laughter in the dark. The Bell Witch has become more than just a haunting. She is woven into Appalachian identity, a story of faith and fear, of justice and revenge, of how thin the veil can be between folklore and fact. So, was the Bell Witch truly a spirit that killed a man, or was she the convenient mask for a human hand-wielding poison? Some say Kate was a demon, others a ghost, and still others a clever lie told long enough to take on a life of its own. But here in the Holler, folks remember. They whisper of John Bell's last days. They tell of the witch's voice, bold and mocking, ringing across a Tennessee night. And they remember that in one case, only one, death was laid not at the feet of man, but of a spirit. You've been listening to Legends from the Holler, where the ridges hold their shadows, and the hollers whisper tales older in time. Light fades, but the stories linger. And if this tale held you for a spell, come on back and sit a while. There's always another story waiting in the dark.